Hello, this is Rob Shaw. I'm the founder of the Mountain Tactical Institute, and welcome to the MTI podcast. Years ago, late 20s, early 30s, I was kind of searching in life for happiness, and I kept on looking for answers, and I couldn't really find an answer of what made people happy. And I started taking a look around, and what I found pretty early on is that reading the most recently written self-help book, usually by somebody who's fairly young, didn't give the good answer. They're always pointing to shortcuts or hacks or something like that. And so what I started doing was taking a look at the people who were 20 to 30 years older than me and identifying the people who really looked happy. As you know, not all old people are happy. There's plenty of bitter old people out there. But I identified the ones who did look genuinely happy. And there's some traits I noticed about them. First is that they generally had been in a long marriage. They had a commitment with a person. Second, they had a long career. They had a commitment to work, generally in one field, and they had done that for a long time. And then third, they really loved where they lived. Most of the people I noticed in the small towns in Wyoming where I was living who stood out to me, the older people, volunteered in their community, really loved to get outside. You could just tell they took pride in their community. They loved where they lived. And so I started putting these thoughts together and developed the happiness formula. And I wrote about this years ago, and many have read it. I want to talk about it today and some of the thoughts that went into it. So first, the happiness formula. Here it is. It's doing work you love, plus living in a place you love, plus being near people you love. And if you have all these three, that equals happiness. If you got 0 for 3, you're pretty damn miserable. 1 for 3, you're significantly unhappy. So you could have a great job, but live in a place you don't love and not be around family or friends, and you're not going to be very happy despite your job. If you got 2 out of 3, you're doing great. So if you got a great job, you're living around people you love, you just wish it was someplace else, you're doing great. And if you got 3 out of 3, you've hit the jackpot. Of all these, doing work you love is perhaps the most difficult. Especially for men, I found. I've never met a man who felt he was underemployed who was happy. I think that men need to be employed at a job that they find worthy of their talents. And if they aren't, then they're just unhappy. One person stands out for me. One time I was in the Coast Guard cadet at the time. We spent a summer at this small boat station in, I think it was in Duluth, Minnesota at the time. And it was just me and this other cadet. It was part of our summer programming, and we were at the small boat station in Duluth. And there was one of the petty officers there. He's a mechanic who just complained about his job all the time. He was a mechanic, but what he really thought he should be doing was working on NASCAR high-level race cars. So he was a great mechanic, but he thought he was underemployed. And for whatever reason, that guy was just miserable. And I've kind of found that same is true of all the men I've met over my life who just have felt they've been underemployed. They've all been unhappy. So I think that it has to be a job especially for men, it has to be worthy of your talents. You have to think it is. And this can be separated from the money you're making. Sometimes it can be tied to money. You may think it's worth your talents and you need to make a certain income, but often it isn't. I've met many, for example, tactical athletes and mountain athletes who really don't make a lot of money, but love their job and are proud of it and think it's worthy of their talents. It needs to be definitely challenging and fulfilling. When I say for men, that's just right, seen for men. For women, it's a little bit different. I have seen women who are underemployed, but they just it didn't seem to eat of them like it did for men. Of course, this isn't true for all women, but what I have found in my own experience is that women, many women, are able to fill the perhaps employment gap they have in their care for the family, being a mother. And certainly that's true of my mom. I remember when my younger brother moved out of the house, I was third, he was the fourth. I remember her telling me, I just loved being a mother. I just loved being a mother. And that always stuck with me. And I've seen the same with many other women who are full-time housewives who, have given up their careers to become a mom, or have had to, step back in their careers and not advance as fast as they would because of their duties at home. And they've made that choice and they're happy with it. I've yet to meet a man who is a stay-at-home dad who's super happy, but I honestly haven't met many of those men. So maybe that's just a genetic difference, or I just haven't run into them. Regardless, this has really been an issue for men. A lot of people get caught up in the rut, and I describe a rut as a grave that's open on both ends, and there's enough pain that something is seriously wrong, but not enough pain to make you stop or make a change. And ruts are pretty terrible. Another issue is nothing would be worse than being bored at work. Nothing is worse than that. And many suffer this every day. I think that's why the job, not only you have to feel is worthy of your talents, but challenges you. Needs to keep you, on your toes and working. The other confounding thing about finding the work you love is it can change over time. I'm on my third or fourth career. I'm 56. I hope to have at least one more. And we aren't static. I wish I was a type of person who could have found a craft that I loved as a young person and just, stuck with that all the years. But for whatever reason, I've kind of changed careers over the years. And, over 10 years in each career, but still a change. And one of the confounding things about the jobs is that you can change, and as you change, the job may not do it for you anymore. And if that's the case, you need to look around. There's when you start feeling something's not right, you need to see that clearly and see if there's a way that you can change it. One way you can do it is to take a craftsmanship ethic, or be a craftsman. And I remember when I was a kid telling my mom or somebody that I was bored, and their response back is, if you're bored of something, learn more about it. And sure enough, when I've kind of told myself that lesson, when that's come up in my life, I've dug back into, the subject matter, my job or my work, and it's always been fulfilling. And this is really a craftsman type approach to work, where you're always learning, you're super interested. You're not even looking for necessarily, you prioritize learning over improvement, just knowing that you're excited to learn, and with learning comes, inevitably comes improvement. And failure is something to be cherished, because you always learn something from failure. You don't always learn something when you have a success. But that is one way to take a look at your job, is to learn more about it and dig into it, apply the craftsman ethic, and maybe your current job is just fine. Just needed to take another viewpoint of it, or take another approach. The other thing you can do is you can take and what I call job craft. Within your job, within your workplace, within your employment, you can take and try to design yourself a new job in that area, that workspace. Last summer, I had an individual who wanted to meet with me. This individual was a law enforcement officer at a federal agency, and he had seen the stuff that I'd done in working with tactical athletes as a coach, and he really wanted to do that. But he had like 18 years in this agency, and he was frustrated. He was kind of looking to see if there's something they could do after he retired, but he still had, several years before retirement. And so he was kind of just chomping at the bit, thinking he may have to be stuck in, in a job he kind of grown out of until he got to do the thing, that he wanted to do. And I encouraged him to take a look at the idea of job crafting. And this idea I've seen before, and one individual I know from Jackson, he was a teacher for years, a middle school science teacher for 10 years. I met him, he started training with me, and he really liked what I was doing on the coaching side. And he started to do some research, and he found out that there's some significant research that shows that strength and conditioning programs in schools have direct benefits on increase in academic success, especially for at-risk youth. And so he went to his school board and he convinced them to create a strength coach position at the high school, and he filled it. So for several years, he was a strength coach at the high school, kind of, putting his theory into practice and seeing the success with it. And then he kind of grew out of that job and he decided to go in administration. He became a vice principal, and then he moved up, and most recently he's a full-on principal at a elementary school. And anyway, what I bring that point up, just the idea that this individual, he was committed, but he had, he did have his retirement coming up. He was in the school district. He didn't want to outright quit. But through the idea of job crafting, he kind of crafted himself three new jobs, just within his own organization, and it worked out for everybody. The organization got to keep a great team member, a great employee, and the school district did, and he got to stay fulfilled at work and stay challenged. So don't give up on job crafting. So number one is doing work you love. Second is living in a place you love. And this comes up often. I live in Jackson, Wyoming, most of the year, and I can't tell you how many times when people ask me where I live, I tell them Jackson. They respond, I've been there before. You're so lucky to live there. And often I'll say, well, why don't you move there? And then you'll start hearing a flood of excuses, whether it's, the real estate market, their current job, this or that. And one of the great things about Jackson, I guess from my perspective, is that I have so much, there's no place in the lower 48 that I've seen that is like Jackson in terms of its mountain outdoor recreation and your proximity to it. The Tetons rise right up from the plains. So if you want to, climb the Grand Teton, you don't need to take, a 12-mile approach to get to the base. You can be there right away and start hiking uphill. And what this means is that Jackson is a training ground for American alpinists and ski mountaineers and free skiers, and big mountain snowboarders and big mountain snowmobilers. And so it is just the natural terrain there and the uniqueness of it just makes it this incredible, playground. I don't want to say playground. It's like a training ground for all of these different sports. And as part of that, you get all these individuals who come there who want to excel in these sports, and that creates a really athletic culture. That if you're into that in terms of training and finding partners and people who are stoked about getting into those sports, it's just a great place to live because it's all right there. And then with the tourism and the money there, Jackson just has an incredible amount of culture for a small town. I think this maybe 20,000 people live there full time. It has plenty of people who commute into work every day from bedroom communities, but yeah, I mean the high-end restaurants, the concerts, even the plays and fine arts, the bars, all that stuff just makes it quite the playground. And so for lots of reasons, it's just a great place to live. It's great for kids. It's really has a really rich school district, so the schools are almost unparalleled in the state. Anyway, it's a great place to live, I think. And for me, who really this combination in my personal life of a granola and redneck athlete, hook and bullet, where I like hunting and fishing, but I also like, skiing and hiking and all that other stuff. It was just a great place to live. And plus, I'm a Wyoming native. I'm a fifth generation Wyomingite, and my kids are going to be sixth generation. So I have those, that heritage that draws me to that place too. And so early on, when I was graduating high school, I always committed to return to Wyoming, and I kind of made it happen. And I'm the only one in my family of my other brothers and sisters. I'm the only one who's lived in Wyoming. And they all act like they want to, but none of them, kind of decided to do that. But what this brings up to me in terms of being happy is this idea of proximity. And if you love surfing and it's a huge part of your life, then living close to a beach means you'll be happier. If you love skiing and it's a huge part of your life, you're not going to be able to get that fulfilled by taking 1 or 2 ski vacations a year. Living in a ski town where you can ski every other day or at a minimum every weekend, you'll be happier. The same thing goes for the third part of the happiness formula, is being near people you love. And again, proximity is worth a lot of money, not only in terms of recreation, but also in terms of just being near your family and people you love, whether that be your parents, your friends, your family, your kids, your grandkids. Years ago in my previous career, I took a look at people moving into Wyoming from urban areas, and they would come there and they would buy 5 acres and kind of a trophy house on it, and it turned out there was a study that found that people who were doing this in one of the pretty places up in Montana were only staying around about 5 years. And the reason was they would kind of retire from their urban place, their urban city, their urban job when they were, late 50s, early 60s, still young and healthy, to move to the mountains. They moved there to get out of the city, but also for the mountain sports and, the mountain type lifestyle. But what they would miss was their kids who are still in the urban area, and especially their grandkids. And so these people would end up selling their house after 5 or so years and moving back to the city where they came from just to be near their grandkids. So for them, the proximity to their family, living close to people they love, outweighed the proximity to their recreation. It was really interesting because the same real estate agent would sell the same house like every 5 years. But I think this just goes to that point of, living close to people you love is so important in terms of being happy. Again, the happiness formula is doing work you love, living in a place you love, and being near people you love. If you got 2 out of 3, you're doing great. And 3 out of 3, you hit the jackpot. What is empowering about the formula is that it doesn't just happen. You can build it. In my own example, I remember calling my uncle, who was a rancher in Kemmer, Wyoming at the time, when I was decided to get out of the Coast Guard. I said, Uncle George, I really want to move back to Wyoming, but there aren't any good jobs there for me. And my uncle, who was never one to give you much sympathy, said, well, Rob, if you want to move to Wyoming, you got to do it like the rest of us and come here and just make it happen. And at that time, I had a scholarship to Carnegie Mellon University to study something in Carnegie Mellon's in Pittsburgh. I called up the school, told them I wasn't coming there. And I called the University of Wyoming, told them I was coming there. I went to the University of Wyoming and paid for my own graduate degree, graduated, no scholarship at UW. It was cheap back in those days. Overloaded, got my master's degree in a year, moved to the town near where I grew up, and started a business, and I made it happen. And there was a few, I'm not going to lie, there were some lean years there, really lean. But the idea comes back, this idea of being able to build it. What is key to all these different elements of the formula, the work you love, being a place you love, and living your people you love, is the idea of commitment. And all good things, I believe, all good things come from commitment. The best things come from commitment. In Jackson, Wyoming, where I live, it's a really kind of an artificial environment, and it's a great place to live, but there's this trap. Many call it the black hole of ambition, because many college graduates will come to Jackson for a year after school with the idea of just being a ski bum for a year, working a service job, and then, getting on with their lives and their careers after that. And they never really leave. They, they work as a service job. They get caught up in the lifestyle. And in Jackson lifestyle, you can make pretty good money at a service job. A lot of service jobs allow you to take, 3 to 6 weeks off in the spring and in the fall. So you can do, beach surf trips to Mexico or climbing trips to Moab. And, of course, if you live there, many of the businesses, they give you a ski pass to ski the resort in the winter. And the summer life is great with the bars and the tourists and the concerts and everything. But none of that takes commitment. And what's cool, when you're 20, 24 years old, skiing every day and drinking every night and, going on your trips and working at a fun restaurant, bussing or bartending and having 4 roommates because that's what it takes to live there. The real estate's so expensive is cool, but at 32, if you're still doing it, it's irresponsible. And then if you're still doing it when you're 42, if you're still doing it with your 42, well, it's just pathetic and sad. And that happened a lot. There were quite a few people there in their 40s who I trained with at the gym who just were in their late 30s, early 40s, and they had never got out of that. They just had never committed to anything. So this idea of commitment is so key. And when it comes to commitment, and back to those older people I met, the things they committed to was first a long-term relationship, right? Do work that you love. Second, a long-term relationship. They were married for a long time. Second, a deep, rewarding career. They committed to a job. They loved the work that they did. And third, they committed to the place where they live. What is, again, empowering about this idea is a commitment doesn't take magic or any outside force. You can commit all on your own. And what it also does is it doesn't allow shortcuts. That's the problem with commitment, is there's no shortcuts to it. You just got to do your time. You got to put in the time. And, like me in my first business, I had to put in the time. And after, 10 years, finally, I was able to see a little bit of light at the end of the tunnel. That was a killer. Even with this gym here, it took 5 years to get Mountain Tactical, up to where it was kind of going on its own. It just takes that type of commitment. And the same is true of any relationship. Everybody listening to this has been in a serious relationship or is one now. And commitment to a relationship is giving up on the idea that you're going to find someone perfect and embracing the idea that you got to find someone and accept their imperfections. And then you got to roll with the punches as they come through life. And commitment to a place is the same type of thing where you quit investing, you put the money away for vacations and you start investing in the place that you live. Taking the time to learn about the place that you live, even if it isn't your first choice. Every place has recreational opportunities or culture, and sometimes you just got to dig it out and find it. Just the idea before I spoke about, being bored, learn more about it. But sometimes it can be like me where, I committed to move back to Wyoming, and with that came, a commitment to create work that I loved, and I was kind of working on those both at the same time. But the idea, and again, the empowering element of commitment is that it doesn't take anybody else. You can do it yourself. So the idea is that through commitment, you don't need to find happiness, but you can build it, one brick at a time, just by putting your time in, keeping your head down, your ass up, and just grinding away. I think that there's this idea a lot of young people have, and even old people have, that commitment is the opposite of freedom. But that hasn't been my experience. Deciding on a partner, committing to a career, and setting down roots in a place or community can be liberating. And this is why, because you're not wasting energy now in dating, trying to find somebody else. You're committed to the person you're with. Committing to a career, you're not wasting time now looking at jobs, thinking about what you might want to do. You know your job, you love it, you're a craftsman about it. You just want to learn more and do better at your own work. And then commitment to a place. I think that's a part of the happiness formula is living in a place you don't love. If you don't live in a place that you love, you can't escape it. I mean, every time you look outside, every time you go for a drive, every time you go to the grocery store, it'll eat at you. Even if you have a job you don't like, you're not at your job all day, right? But if you're living in a place you hate, it's with you all the time, and you can't escape it. But the opposite is true. If you live in a place you love, then every drive, every errand, every time you get up in the morning, go for a walk, whatever, just reinforces how much you love the place, and it just builds upon itself. And by committing to a place, then all of a sudden, you're not looking on Zillow for another place to buy. You are committed to making your home or the place you live your home. You get involved in the community. You just stop looking around, and it just is liberating because you can put all your energy now into the place you're at rather than bouncing around looking at other places. So it kind of eliminates the choice making you have to do. Takes the decision making out of it. And of course, the same is true of the partner and obviously a job. So that's it. That's the happiness formula and some of the thoughts that went into it. Hope you got something from it. If you have any questions, go ahead and email me. It's rob at mtntactical.com, and we'll talk to you next week.